those pivotal moments, as I like to call them, those tap moments, are not reserved for Green Berets or members of the Israeli Defense Forces. They're according to high performance coach Jeff Spencer, who was an Olympic medalist and who also coached Olympic cyclists. He says that every human on the planet is going to experience 2 to 3 pivotal moments every year. And I define that pivotal moment, or that tap on the shoulder moment, as Winston Churchill referred to it, as a moment that it is strategic in nature, where an opportunity presents itself to you. The bigger the opportunity is, the bigger the potential outcome is, the more resistance, that self-sabotage, is going to show up inside of us and tell us that we should go the other way.
Hello, Scott. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good to see
Hello.
you, brother.
Good, good. Great to see you, and I appreciate your time. I know you're crazy busy, and I really appreciate your time today. And you know what? When I thought about what to talk with you, so many different things came up in my mind. Like, we could, of course, talk about, your Lieutenant Colonel and Special Forces Green Beret and Pineapple and your family and actor, and like I had so many things in my head. But then, like, as I was thinking, I heard one of your lectures. I think it was one of your TED Talks, and that one like really stood out to me. So with all the appreciation for all the beautiful things that you have done in the past and doing in the future, and you're going to do and actually doing also now in the present, I want to ask you a question. Many times, men, also women, but especially, people from special forces, they're like these tough guys, everyone think, and they won't be vulnerable. And then you sharing on the TED Talk, the fact that you're in the closet and with a gun in your
Yeah.
hand. Yeah, and like and thinking to, like, maybe it's not, maybe just to end the life, and sharing that, like, to being that vulnerable. Then your kid walked in. So first, if you could share again that story, and that's number one. And number two, how does someone like you, that you're like, the alpha, like, you're like at the top of the top, how I think vulnerability is courage, but how do you get that courage to be that vulnerable?
I mean, thank you. So I'll start with, I guess, the event itself is, I spent nearly 2 decades in U.S. Army Special Forces, otherwise known as the Green Berets, and that was a dream that I had had since I was 14 years old. So it was something that I had always wanted to do, and then I had the opportunity to do it, and then to go to combat with those amazing, high performing individuals on multiple occasions, primarily in Afghanistan, was really a dream come true on so many levels. And in spite of the pain and the loss and the time away from my family that often comes from the crucible of combat, overall, I was playing the highest level of my life when I retired from Special Forces in 2013. But within 18 months of that, I found myself in a very different place after I retired, living in Florida with my family. My family was still intact. I had a good job as a contractor. We're still happily married and had a big future in front of us. But it was as if everything is like I changed planet on myself without purpose. I found myself without an identity that I had known to be my identity for many years, and that opened the door for the stuff that I had pushed down for month after month, year after year, in order to stay deployed. The guilt, the PTS, the moral injury, all of those things that we know today are part and parcel of combat. I just did like a lot of other operators did, and I just pushed it down and I kept going, because that's what you did to stay in the fight. That's what the quiet professional did. And it finally got to a point where I was just like I was floating, 4 feet off the earth, untethered, and really feeling like I was a burden to my wife, to my kids. My mood swings were terrible. I just was like, I don't even belong here. And so, it took me to the darkest place of my life, to where I did nearly take my life, and thought about it a lot. And to this day, even with my wife sitting here beside me, it's one of the hardest things for me to talk about, because it is an aspect of, it's embarrassing. It's not something I'm proud of. It's not something that that I could even today explain why I got to that place. But I had just lost so many friends to suicide in 2018 that I decided to talk about it openly. And I'm glad I did. I called that talk, that TED talk you're referring to, the generosity of scars, and I believe that it has, helped a lot of people in the sense that it's isolation is such a terrible thing, as you probably know from your time in the service. I mean, and you don't have to be a military person to become isolated in today's world.
Oh, for sure.
As we deal with Men's Mental Health Month in June, I think that's one of the things is that isolation and that feeling of being alone is a terrible contributor to suicide, depression, alcoholism, substance abuse, and a range of other things. So I that was the first part of it, and thankfully I had again, my son did come home when he did, but I also had a lot of mentors or several mentors who stepped up and helped me find my way through that, primarily through the use of storytelling.
Yeah.
And that became for me an outlet. It became a way for me. So you asked about vulnerability. Storytelling, I believe, is one of the ways that we can find our way. Not only we can heal ourselves, but we can take those scars, those blemishes on the soul, on the skin, whatever they are, those struggles, and we can repurpose them in the service of others through narrative. And that's what I started doing. And it was the storytelling that allowed me to talk about my struggle, that scar of standing in that closet. And turns out that we listen autobiographically to stories. We make ourselves relatable to other people, not just vulnerable, but relatable. And when that happens, people can see a pathway out of their own darkness. And then all of a sudden, not only are you healing yourself, but you're lighting a pathway for others. And that's what really started to happen for me, I think, and gave me a new journey, a new path for my life.
Did you think back then when you shared this story that this story will help other people? Like, can we say that the fact you thought you being vulnerable will save other people's life?
Only because I had done enough storytelling and had been trained by some very, very prolific storytelling coaches did I believe that it might help. But none of that did me any good when I was preparing to walk into that red circle and talk about something that only weeks before I had shared with my wife and grown boys for the first time. I was terrified. I came so close to not going on or to just changing back to what my original talk had been. I changed it the last minute after losing another friend to suicide. So I was very scared to do it. I was embarrassed to do it. There's a saying, when we repurpose our struggle in the service of others, that's called a scar story. And there's the two greatest scar stories out there. The second best one is the one you don't want to tell others. The very best one is the one you don't want to tell yourself. And I sure did not want to tell that either one of those. And so I was terrified, but I felt down in my soul that if I could do it, it would help people. And it
Oh,
has.
I have no doubt about that. And to be honest, Scott, like I know you went through a lot of different gunfights, and you also shared in one of your videos when you went to that pub and it exploded, and then there was a second explosion. With all that said, and with all, like, of course, a lot of courage is needed there, but I think to be that vulnerable for a million, like, that millions of people are probably going to watch this. I'm not comparing. I'm just saying that I think it's a beautiful act of courage, and I really appreciate you for that, because I have no doubt that it helped people, because many people, I'm sure, are carrying those type of loads with them. And you said that storytelling is something really important, but if we're ashamed of what, like, I'm thinking about these type of things, whether it's suicide, hurting myself, doing something else that creates any damage, and then they see someone like you sharing that, so that, okay, if Scott also went through challenging things and also thought about different thoughts, so we can also save our lives by sharing and having storytelling, telling our story with other people. So I really appreciate you for that. I think that act of courage is way above words. So thank you very much for
Thank
that
you.
one. And you also said, if there's something that over here, I want you to explain to me, like, how can someone, when he's like down, like at rock bottom, how can he use this next sentence that you said? You said that, what if your ugliest scar is your most beautiful gift? Well, if you own your story, you said, but how can, I think it's a beautiful saying, But then I thought to myself, how can someone, when like, he's down or she's down at rock bottom, like when you're telling them now, Scott, that their scar is their beautiful gift, they're like, what? So how do you rise up when you're all the way down there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's easy to feel like, how in the world would that be possible when I'm so far down in the hole? How would it be possible that what I have to say could help anybody? I can barely help myself. And what I will tell you is where I've seen that on display in its purest form is, I'm an alcoholic. I've been in recovery. When I was out there drinking, man, I was I was about as bad as it could get. I was at the bottom. This was well before I found myself in that closet. So I've had plenty of bottoms in my life. There's no shortage of those moments. But my drinking was really bad, and I got into recovery. And in that program, I was astounded because like a couple of times a month they would have what they called a speaker meeting, and the speaker would come in, and they looked like what I wanted to be. They were clean, and they were sober, and they were happy, and they were smiling, and I was not. And I wanted that. But I was there in that little room, smoke filled room, and all these other addicts and alcoholics sitting on either side of me, and listen to this speaker, and they would start their story by talking about what they had been through. And it was, to me, it was astounding how many of them had been through far worse in terms of, bottom than I had been through. But yet I'm looking at this person that's like, that's not where they are now. They're actually employed, and they're successful, and their kids are happy, and they're thriving. Like, that's not, how's that possible? But then I would think, oh, damn, all right, well, if they were down there and they're there now, and I'm looking at this person, then you know what? That's possible for my life too. Maybe I should do what they say to do in these rooms. Um, just today, right? And that's how I got sober, and I've stayed sober for over 20 years, and
Um,
but it goes back to your question, which is, how is it possible that when I'm at my lowest low that I could actually be of use to somebody? Well, the reality is that is when you're of the most use to people, because the science and the biology backs this up. We're humans are social creatures. We don't have fur, fangs, or claws. The way that we stay on top of the food chain and the way that we navigate the world is that we are able to group and form connections better than any other human. And so we've used storytelling in this capacity for probably 70,000 years. We have used story as a way to repurpose our struggle in the service of others. And so what I say to people who are at that bottom, if you really want to know what it is that you offer, and if you're worried about you and you being at your lowest point, how can I? It's not about you. It's about them. It's about the person that you're sharing the story with, and it's so refreshing for the time that it takes you to tell that story to just be about them. Tell your story for so that they don't have to live what you lived, right? You share your struggle, they listen autobiographically, they locate themselves in your story, and it's as if they went through the struggle physically themselves. I mean,
um,
I call that the generosity of scars. I mean, what a gift to give to another human being. And so that's my answer to that, is that there is just ultimate generosity in it, and all the science backs it up. And the more terrified you are to do it, the more you are right where you need to be.
wow, that's amazing. Like when you're saying that now at this stage, and of course there's always challenges, but what you're saying now, it's not something that is only relevant for now. It's something that's relevant for anyone in any stage, because we always go through the challenges. And I think that combination of,
Absolutely.
that sharing our story, of course, with people we trust, and then, helping other people and having someone guide us. You said that those mentors or those people that were sitting there in those groups, they went through similar things. So I like when I speak to people, I tell them it doesn't matter what you went through, 99.9% someone went through something similar. So why not learn from them how to get out? And then in the future, like you said, you could be the one teaching someone, because you're like
Yep.
you mentioned like so many times, that your scar is your gift. And I think when we have that understanding, maybe we're all the way down there, But when we have that understanding that we could help someone that is in a worse situation than us through our pain, that can really help people, help people overcome their challenges, and also not only overcome, even grow from them. Because so many times, life taps us on our shoulder, and you're going to share a
Yep.
lot more than that in a second. But and like everything could go make believe smooth, and all of a sudden life is like, hey, and then something happens, and we need to deal with it. And talking
It's so true.
well, I would love to hear like what from your perspective, just going talking about life tapping you on the shoulder from growing up in America with your father, going around the forest and hiking and enjoying with your family. All of a sudden, after well, now all of a sudden you've prepared yourself a long time, but getting to Afghanistan and as a Green Beret and helping people, like what like all of a sudden like a whole different life. A whole you're not anymore in the Smoky Mountains. You're in the desert in Afghanistan, and people are trying to kill you.
Yeah.
And through these times, life taps you on the shoulder all like through your whole service. When you think everything is quiet, then you go into the barn and it explodes. What do you do in those times when life taps you on the shoulder and you're just surprised? So number one is, how do you deal with them? And I'll get to number two after that.
Well, I think the big thing I would say is that those pivotal moments, as I like to call them, those tap moments, are not reserved for Green Berets or members of the Israeli Defense Forces. They're according to high performance coach Jeff Spencer, who was an Olympic medalist and who also coached Olympic cyclists. He says that every human on the planet is going to experience 2 to 3 pivotal moments every year. And I define that pivotal moment, or that tap on the shoulder moment, as Winston Churchill referred to it, as a moment that it is strategic in nature, where an opportunity presents itself to you in a way that if you accept it, if you lean into it, there is a potential for a strategic outcome that could change the course of your life. And I fully believe that. And I believe that every single human on the planet is afforded those opportunities a couple times a year. And how we respond to them, how we prepare for them, is everything. And those tap on the shoulder moments, I believe, are fleeting. They are unexpected. They can often come in the form of bad news or a tragedy or a crisis. And everybody else is going to step back. That's another way you're in it. When everyone else steps back and you're like, nobody else is coming, that's probably that moment. I can say for me, when Afghanistan collapsed and my friend Nizam was reaching out for help and looking for answers, and I kept saying, well, somebody from the government, somebody from Special Ops Command is going to do something. And they didn't. And eventually it's like, okay, nobody's coming. If Nizam's going to get out alive, it's going to have to be his buddies that do it. That's a tap on the shoulder moment, and being open to that. And I promise you, I wasn't beaming with confidence when that moment happened. I didn't have like my hands on my hips and follow me, like it was terrifying. I felt unprepared. I felt ill prepared. I felt like an imposter. I think I said that in the Pineapple book multiple times, is that
Right.
there were other people who should have been doing that, not me.
Yep.
And that's what it's going to feel like when those pivotal moments happen. We're oftentimes not going to feel like we're the right choice. The resistance that Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art is going to get strong, and the bigger the opportunity is, the bigger the potential outcome is, the more resistance, that self-sabotage, is going to show up inside of us and tell us that we should go the other way. It's not a tap on the shoulder moment. It's just bad news. So just go feel sorry for yourself, get a beer, and it'll pass.
You said so we need to prepare ourselves, and you also have a saying that the difference between a pro and an amateur is the amount of practice a person puts inside. So when you said that, what type of practice, like what do you mean when you say prepare yourself, prepare our mindset? Because when these things happen in life, like you don't know what they'll happen. So what do you mean when you say prepare yourself?
Well, I think it transcends a couple of things. First of all, we always talk about mindset, and I know that's very important to you. And so I believe that there is an element of mindset associated with this, where you either believe that those taps on the shoulder are going to happen or you don't. That's number one, right? What I just said, do you believe in your heart that you're going to be afforded 2 to 3 pivotal moments in the coming 12 months, right? If you don't believe it, then this is a short conversation. If you think that, well, that happens to other people, that doesn't happen to me. Okay, conversation over. I hope you change your mind. If you believe that, then there's a certain mindset there needs to be a bit of a switch here. It's like, okay, well, I'm in a bad place right now. I'm not in a good place. I'm struggling, but there's going to be a couple of pivotal moments coming my way, and I need to be open to them, and I need to be ready for them. Right. So that conversation with yourself, the most important stories in the world are the ones we tell ourselves, particularly when times are hard, because the brain is a metaphorical pattern matching organ. It tells itself a story and it operates off old patterns. So if you don't give the brain a new pattern, it's just going to tell itself an old story, probably one of pain. So it's really important to acknowledge, I think, and internalize that, yeah, yep, a couple times a year, this thing's coming. I need to be ready. And I need to know what it's going to, when it shows, like how, get ready for it. And I believe it's usually going to be probably 80% of the time, it's going to come as bad news. Or it's going to seem so daunting, it will literally scare the crap out of you. Like it will, and you will feel like an immediate imposter as soon as you're faced with it. And then the other metric is look around and watch what other people are doing. If they're stepping back, take a big breath, because you are probably in it right now. So those are the things. Now, can you train for that? Yes, you absolutely can train for that. I believe in mindfulness training, breath work, physicality, having a really solid ritual and rhythm by which you work mind, body, and spirit, and you stay as open as you can. If you participate in behavior that typically keeps you closed, you know what I'm talking about? Like if you watch 24/7 news,
Yeah.
if you stay on the internet all the time, you're going to be closed. If you look for opportunities that keep you open and expanded and in your body and present and maybe looking out for other people, you're probably going to be more open to those taps on the shoulder.
Oh, for sure. I really love what you mentioned. Also, the beginning basically is, I think it's acceptance. Like, because you said like we could end our conversation right now if you don't agree with that fact, right? So, but
Yeah.
when you agree with that fact and you accept that it's going to come, so number one, there's that kind of acceptance and surrender. I'm a big believer in God. I start my day with talking with Him, but and gratitude and all that. And when we accept and we surrender, that's number one. After that, okay, now we know it's going to happen. Now, of course, work on mind, body, presence. So I think there are many things that we can do, but it's mainly also releasing control, understanding that we could prepare ourselves, but we won't necessarily know what to do, but have the faith and trust that you have the capability to overcome it if you got that present, that scar, and then turn it into your gift. So I think that's really beautiful. And I want to also ask another thing about connections, because you mentioned your friend in Afghanistan. You spoke about connections. So you're not in the army when you get this phone call. Like you're not in the special forces. You're out already, and you get that phone call. That means that's someone that trusts you in like life and death. Like I know how it is. There are people that you'll take a bullet for them in any minute, and I have friends in my team that'll do the same. But that's a type of connection that you create in life and death situations. And that's a really strong connection. My question to you, Scott, is how do people that are not in the military, like how do you create that strong connection, that strong trust, that someone will give you a phone call and, hey, I need your help, or the opposite, you'll ask for their help?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. That's something that rooftop leadership that we focus on more than anything else is on the power of social capital or human connection. And I mean, certainly when you are dealing in high stakes environments, for example, law enforcement or EMTs or firefighting or, military, by definition, there is such a bond that is necessary to survive that, shared struggle, shared danger is obviously going to accelerate that primal trust factor that we have, that is normally reserved for, close tribes or kin or family. But the question is, can you replicate that in the civilian world? Can you replicate that in your business? Can you replicate that in your community? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are some phenomenal books and works on this by guys like Robert Putnam, who wrote Bowling Alone, um, Sebastian Younger, who wrote Tribes. I mean, a lot of good work on it. But I think to synthesize it, what I would say is really what it comes down to is committing to enhancing your skills in purpose-based, intentional human connection. Like really getting deliberate and committed to the caliber of your relationship portfolio, right? You whether that is dealing with the same, checkout clerk that you talk to every time you stop at a Circle K to get gas on the way home, or whether that is, negotiating with a client or talking to your teenager about being bullied online. How we interact with the other party, how we present ourselves in an interpersonal way is everything. And most people are, not only are they untrained, but the environment that we live in is so non-conducive to human connection and so transactional and so fear-based that we are actually staying in a sympathetic state of fight, flight, or freeze most of the time. So learning how to become an empathetic witness, as Daniel Hardy says, in Personality as a Permanent. In other words, holding space for the other party so that their emotional temperature can come down, and just making a human connection before you do anything, right? Just getting in the habit of, if you're going to throw your slideshow up, fine, make a human connection first. If you're going to pitch your agenda for the convention, fine. Have you made a human connection? I mean, it starts with that, and putting a value and a premium on human connection in how you navigate your arena, and then train your ass off at it, because it's not a foregone conclusion that your instincts are enough. In fact, I would tell just about anybody that instincts are no longer sufficient for human connection and social capital. You need to train. You need to work at it. And that includes active listening. It includes nonverbal communications, and certainly what I call narrative competence, the use of purposeful storytelling in real time to meet your goals and the goals of the other party. Like, train, work at it. And there's lots of different resources out there, but those are the people that are going to thrive. Those are the people who are going to own the room, so to speak, in hard times, because they're relatable to the other party's pain and they're relevant to their goals. And that's what humans follow.
I love what you said about the commitment part, that you need to be committed and trained for it. But my question is this: what happens, okay, if let's say now, okay, you want to be there for someone, you want to help, you want to create that connection, but what if they don't really appreciate it? I'll give you an example. Okay, so you said that, as a Green Beret, you go to Afghanistan, to these villages, and you say you work by, how do you say, I wrote down, you work by and through people and help them stand on their own, which is beautiful. And you also said that, you help little guys stand up against the bad guys. So you're always there to help people that are kind of in a disadvantaged place, and have empathy for them and be there for them. But what if the other person is not with you? Like, they don't really care about you trying to be in any type of connection, but
Well,
it's an important connection that needs to be created. So in your case, right, it was life and death in Afghanistan. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But what do you know? What do you do at work? So, or with your spouse or with your kids, that it's important. But right now, no, they're not really bringing their part to the table.
what works in life and death works in life and business. And the reason is because humans are remarkably similar in how we're wired to interact with each other. There are a lot of similarities, even though the stakes are different. There are a lot of similarities because we're all wired essentially the same way. The human dynamic has really not changed. So let's take the analogy that you just presented. If I'm sitting across from an Afghan elder who's angry at me, he's tickling the trigger of his AK-47. There are certain red lines that I can't cross. Like, if he tries to harm me, if he tries to harm my team, that's a red line, right? And I'm always prepared to be as coercive as I need to be. Green Berets had more killed in action in Afghanistan than all other branches combined.
Wow.
And the reason was because they immerse themselves in the very environment where they are doing prolonged missions, persistent presence, and working with the locals like that really agitates guerrillas. It agitates the bad actors in a way that it feels it's the most threatening, right? Because they need the population on. I have to be ready to defend myself and my team at a moment's notice, and that does happen. People are in this fear-based state where they strike out, they lash out. But what we learned the hard way is that if that is your go-to mechanism, if the only tool in your kit bag is a hammer, then every single problem that you face looks like a nail. And the reality is that humans are not actually designed to be confrontational creatures. Anger is a secondary emotion, not a primary emotion. Secondary. Fear is a primary emotion. Sadness is a primary emotion. Joy is a primary emotion. Anger is second. Now, there's a reason for that, is because humans are social creatures. Now, we can be very dangerous. We can be very mean, very nasty, right? But if we allow that to become our primary default, then we are allowing a secondary emotion to dominate our navigating the world. And as the mental health expert Ivan Tyrrell says, anger makes you stupid, right? It puts you in your perspective of the world is the size of a soda straw. You're operating from a state where you are in survival mode. So your ability to even think rationally about higher functioning problems is almost non-existent. So what I'm saying to you is, even if the other party is resistant, even if the other party doesn't want to come along and they're being agitated or disrupting, I mean, yeah, I've got to have red lines where I manage my own equities, but I never want to lose my emotional temperature and go into a fear-based state that mirrors that, because I lose my own agency. I lose my own ability to move towards my goals. I become emotional and then I start tubing my own goals, right? So even if the other party, and they're probably going to be emotional because we live in a society that operates on fear, right? So the other party is going to be emotional. How do I bring their emotional temperature down using old school interpersonal skills and get them ready to listen to what I have to say? That's what a pro does. That's what a pro does in a moment of duress, right? Anybody can gun up and be coercive. A trunk monkey can do that, right? But what takes real skill is the ability to manage your own emotional temperature, bring the other party's emotional temperature down, and get them ready to listen to what you have to say by focusing on their goals and yours. Takes real skill. That's why I say you got to practice. Otherwise, you're going to get sucked into that churn of fear and anger, and all of a sudden it goes tribal on you, and you're just caught up in what everybody else is caught up in.
Wow, I think, just understanding, as a practice, we could take that as step number 2, but like step number 1 is like not to let their anger or their, the fact that they're kind of rejecting us, not to let that affect us and bring up our anger. Because like you said, it's a secondary, like that shouldn't be the main. We should stay on our ground and maybe have empathy and be there for them instead of losing it. I think if that's like step number 1, people could do in any type of relationship. When the person that you really come, you come and you want to be there for them, but they're not really accepting you because maybe they're mad and they have their whatever they're going through, or it's a business meeting, whatever it is. Like, let's not lose our ground. Let's like, okay, there's a reason whatever they're going through now. Let's understand how we can have empathy for them and lower their resistance, and that way and create that contact. So I think that's really beautiful. I want to go.
I'll give you a quick tool that anyone can use, and just try it. If you don't believe me, try it and watch it for yourself. But it's basically using thoughtful, open-ended questions that allow the other party to respond in narrative, right? So if you're in a disagreement with someone over the fact that you didn't get a proper price on a product that was offered, and you feel like you were told one thing and then you were given another, you could say, well, can you just tell me something? How am I supposed to explain this to my spouse when I told her that the price was this, and John told me on Tuesday at 1 p.m. the price was this, and now you're charging me this? How am I supposed to do that? And then just let them answer it. And they may be agitated as well, but just in the fact that they have to respond in story and in narrative, their emotional temperature will start to come down. and they give you an answer, and maybe it's not the answer that actually needs to be given. It's like, okay, well, I understand that, and I really appreciate the fact that that's your situation. And what I'm hearing you say is that you can't do it because of this. Is that right? And they say, that's right. Well, but can you still help me? How am I supposed to explain this to my wife when you guys gave me this price? And you keep asking thoughtful, open-ended questions that allow them to respond to you in narrative. And eventually their emotional temperature comes down and they're ready to listen. And you can start to have a conversation. How and what questions, as Chris Voss says, and Never Split the Difference, are a great way
Great book.
to do what I'm talking about. And it works.
Yeah, I love it. Not only that it works, I think then you could also reveal the real core problem or the real resistance, because many times what the person will have, the resistance that comes up is just like it's not the real one. And when you ask those open-ended questions, you can reveal
Yep.
the core resistance. So I really appreciate that too, and I really recommend whoever's listening to this in any type of any type of relationship, open-ended questions and curiosity. It's not open-ended questions and just nodding the head, okay, finish talking. It's open-ended questions and being curious. I want to ask you a question regarding what you said before. You a few times you mentioned the fact that it's important, to be committed and to practice and to train. But sometimes in life, when we put goals and we practice, we train, and things don't really work the way we want them to work. When do we know that, okay, now it's the time to go all in? Like you said in one of your interviews, that also, in the military, that there's this part that that, okay, from here there's no point going back, and then you're all in, whatever it is you're doing. I forgot how you mentioned what's how you called it, but like,
The mission decision line.
yeah, exactly. So how do you know in life, like, okay, am I right now in the mission decision line that, okay, from here I'm all in? Or listen, sometimes maybe, Scott, it's important to know, okay, this is not for me, and to draw back, like whether it's now in it could be a goal that you have in your life, a conversation with your spouse, business, deal that you're working on, that like where is that line that, like, when do you cross to, okay, no return, or okay, we leave next?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. I mean, we had to answer this question a lot during COVID, right? And I think a lot of businesses are dealing with this now, small businesses in particular, with the recession. Um, but it does have military applications. And again, for those who don't know, the mission decision line is an invisible phase line that's on a map.
Could share
It
your story.
corresponds, yeah, it corresponds with a place on the ground, that's easily recognizable. And it's when you cross it, there's no turning back. There's no turning back. But what I would say is it's easy to I think it's easy to confuse in our mind the pursuit of a goal, which is the why, and the execution of that pursuit, which is a how and a what, right? And so the mission decision line is really designed to address the why, the goal itself, right? So in the military, we would establish a point on the ground that when we cross that line, we're going for that goal. There is no turning around. I mean, yes, you have abort criteria and things like that, worst case scenario, but for the most part, you're going forward. Like, you're going to achieve, you're going to go do that no matter what happens. But where it can get and I wish I had another TED talk to go back and further clarify this, but what you're basically saying is, when we cross this line, all the way up until that, we can pull back and say, okay, we're not ready to go after this. Let's wait a while. Let's plan some more. Let's look at more contingencies. But once we cross it, we're going for it. That does not mean that you can't pull up and say, okay, this plan isn't working, right? It doesn't mean that you continue to just push forward into the breach when everybody's dropping around you and it's like suicide mission. That's not what this means. And it doesn't mean that for business either. When our business, our leadership company got into COVID, we established a mission decision line. It's like, look, we are going to be relevant to as many business leaders who are going through a crisis of this magnitude, in many cases for the first time. We are going to help them do this no matter what it takes. We are going to be relevant. And our mission decision line, we established, it was like 96 hours after COVID officially hit. And
Oh,
we crossed that MDL. There was no looking back. But we had to pull up on multiple occasions and do a, quote unquote map check and see where we are in the forest and go up to some high ground and look around and go, wow, this plan isn't working at all. We need to look at doing more remote keynotes or more remote negotiation courses, or, we need to put the high stakes on video modules. Like, we had to change the how and the what a lot in order to
oh,
get to the why, to the goal. So the mission decision line is more of it's a commitment, but you still retain freedom of movement, right? To do whatever you
mm.
need to do to adapt the plan and change the plan and modify the plan to achieve the goal.
Wow. I love that definition, because what you said, I think, can help for sure me, can help but so many people, because sometimes we're stuck on saying, okay, this is what we said we're going to do, and that's a mission decision line, and there's, like you said, okay, that's why you're doing it, but change, you could always change the how you do it, and like the way you do it, like that could always change, and we could be a little bit more flexible and more self-forgiving with ourselves if we need to change, not only if we must. I think, as we move through life, we must change. So I think that understanding that, yeah, be committed, yeah, have that point, okay, from here I'm moving forward, pushing forward, but understanding that, yeah, being also flexible to life and understanding that the way we do
Right.
things will change. So I think that's really beautiful, and really thank you for clarifying that. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Just one last thing. I know your time is precious, so I'll ask you a question about rooftop leadership. From where did you get that name? I have
Yeah.
something in my mind, but I want to hear if that's what the if it's what I think.
No, cool. So I'll throw a little teaser out there. If you go to scottmann.com, all three of my TED Talks are at the bottom. I've done three. The one of the TED Talks is called Rooftop Leadership, and it explains in a lot of detail where that name came from. But what I will tell you is this, and this is, it's part and parcel of my methodology and my approach to leadership. Is I witnessed over and over again this type of leadership where Green Berets and other special operators would go into these trust depleted places, and over time they would build relationships with the locals that live there, and they built that trust when risk was low, and then they would leverage that trust when risk was high. So they would go into these trust depleted places, they would help them farm, they would help them solve disputes, they would provide medical care for their kids, they would teach them how to do their own medical skills, how to defend themselves. And whenever an attack would come, because like I said, the terrorists and the insurgents hated anything that would pull the locals away from their support base, they would attack the Green Berets who lived in that community every night. And at first, the Green Berets would be the only ones that would go to the rooftop and repel the attack, and the locals would stay below. But then after a couple of weeks, invariably, you would see a muzzle flash on an adjacent rooftop, and one farmer would have made the decision to go up on his roof and defend his home. And then the next night, there'd be three farmers. And then the next night, the entire village was collectively doing what they had done for centuries, which was defending themselves. And over time, I started to call that approach rooftop leadership, the ability to move people when they're scared or angry or hurting, up to that proverbial rooftop and take action that they otherwise wouldn't take, not because they have to, but because they choose to. And it's done by building trust when risk is low and being willing to go up on that rooftop by yourself and holding space until others find the courage to do it. And it's usually old school interpersonal skills combined with that rough and ready willingness to stand and swing a big stick when you need to. And that is in essence rooftop leadership.
Yeah, I love that. That's also what I remember. I listened to that TED talk, and just want to make sure, with my English as second language, I understood it. So happy to hear it's
You
that.
got it.
I think it's more than words can really describe, like what you went through there, also with your teams, but not only with your teams, but also with the people there. That maybe being kind of connected to you could maybe threaten their life after you leave, and we saw what happened now. And pineapple operation that was amazing, like what you put together. But I thought also about another thing, as I was
Thanks.
listening to a few of your conversations. I need to tell you thank you. It's much more than beautiful what you have done for other people, which are like family for you. But I think another part that could be that jumped to my mind. You know, I used to do some I used to be in the real estate business in America for a short amount of time. And then when I heard the rooftop leadership, so I was like, you know, in order to get to the roof, we need all the team to do it. Like each person does their part until we get to the top to the roof. But there's a leader always that he's like, you know, he's watching everyone, think, make sure everyone does whatever they need to do. They listen to, you know, feedback and everything, but then they make sure that everyone together get to the roof, because on our own we can't. But having that leader
I
that
like that.
coordinates everyone together, so I really
Love
like.
it, man.
I love the name, and I really appreciate all of the, you know, all of your life is service, and I appreciate you and all of your family, because I know, you know, behind any military person, there's family and friends that are there to support, and you
Absolutely.
know, if they're there for you, so that gives you the option to push forward. So I really appreciate you and your family and your time today. And thank you for all the beautiful work that you have done, that you're doing right now. And I'm also sure that you're going to continue to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, brother. It was an honor to be on with you.
I hope you enjoyed the video and you got some tools to overcome your challenges and light your path. For us to help other people, please press that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget that the most amazing things in life are the one you take for granted.